Ryan, the baby, is going to conduct the meeting today.
Excellent. She's so cute.
Just kidding.
What a cutie. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming to the Monday Book Club call tonight. We're doing chapter 7. It's a short chapter titled The Secret to Self-Control. Last week, we kind of focused on environment and how you can use environment to create good habits, which is, if we go back to the beginning, they're talking about the first law, make it obvious, like building habits. And so tonight is the inverse of that. So if you want to break a bad habit, you want to make it invisible. And as always, any questions, comments, thoughts, ideas, feel free to jump on either in person or in the chat, and love to hear what you're thinking. I guess before we get into it, did anybody use anything from last week? When we were talking about environment, using your environment to help create a new habit, anybody incorporate any of that into their lives? Dana?
Yep. So as promised, no snacking in a workroom has been a success. Operation worked. Redesigning the room by changing the rules in it. So I have been snack free while working for a week.
I love it. Do you want to share for maybe those who weren't here last week? Like what was the change you made in your environment?
Well, we were talking about changing the environment. Tech had the idea of, how difficult it is for somebody that works from home to stay focused and to stay on track with just work because you have a lot of stuff distracting you. You could technically try to do extra stuff and put in a load of laundry and doing the dishes while you're working, which distracts you. So at this moment, until I'm ready to move out into a bigger warehouse with the entire operation, I was thinking that what if, redesign the space by redesigning the rules inside the space. So I figured that, like my office is going to be a sacred room where we can have beverages, but no food. So it worked.
I like it.
It worked really good. So now I just have to, I kind of have the same rule for the bedroom. I try not to, eat in bed and stuff like that. And then you just use the kitchen to eat food, which if you're busy and you're working, chances are you're not going to spend time in the kitchen. So in the end, it kind of works out. Spreading the house in different areas.
Yeah, he talked about that last chapter, right? One space. What was it? One space, one. What was it? Basically, each space has its own activity, like what Dana's saying. One space, one use, something like that. And I think having a dedicated workspace is really important in keeping the food out. And plus, like you've mentioned, I don't know if it was this call, like you've got some fitness, some health goals too. So, when we think about how our lives overlap, like if you want to get your listings up, well, you've got to be alert, and sleep and food and all these things kind of leak together or overlap. All right, so let's look at self-control. They started this chapter study in Vietnam, and they said as many as 20% of the soldiers in Vietnam became addicted to heroin. And there was a lot of concern that once they came back to the US, there was going to be this massive heroin addiction problem. But when they came back, only 5% were still addicted within 12 months of coming to the US. And so basically they realized that the reason a lot of it was the environment influenced those addictions. Things like, let's see, on page 92, in Vietnam, soldiers spent all day surrounded by cues triggering heroin use. It was easy to access. They were engulfed by constant stress of war. They built friendships with fellow soldiers who were also heroin users, and they were thousands of miles from home. Once a soldier returned to the US, though, he found himself in an environment devoid of those triggers. When the context changed, so did the habit. So like that's kind of like a big epiphany, realizing that our habits, a lot of them are tied to our environment. And so that they didn't have that big drug problem nearly as much as they thought they were going to have. On the bottom of 92, it talks about how here, I'll just read it. The Vietnam studies ran counter to many of our cultural beliefs about bad habits because it challenged the conventional association of unhealthy behavior as moral weakness. If you're overweight, a smoker, or an addict, you've been told your entire life it is because you lack self-control, maybe even that you're a bad person. The idea that a little bit of discipline would solve all of our problems is deeply embedded in our culture. Now, when I read that, it kind of made me think, because in our group, I know a lot of people struggle with a listing habit. That's our main thing, right? And I've been guilty of thinking that, like, you know, when I struggle to get my listing habit, you know, it's just weakness. But I think looking at your listing habit and the environmental factors, like how can we structure our work environment? And Tech talked about this last week, right? Like if we came to work for him, that environment's different. It's set up to succeed. So maybe for us working at home, I like how Dana is looking at her environment. What are some things we can do to help ourselves succeed at home? Or does anybody have any thoughts on that? Any struggles? Or any of that? Like, right, it's like this notion of if you can't hit your goal, it's like a moral weakness. But you know, maybe we need to look at it more in terms of environment. And then he went on. This is a real short chapter, so I'll just read a couple of these paragraphs. If y'all have anything, jump in. Justin says, remove distractions, TV for me. Yeah, I think that's a big one. Because if you go back to the one thing with Gary Keller, you know, you can't, this whole multitasking is a myth. You're losing time while you're trying to multitask. He said, recent research, however, shows something different. When scientists analyze people who appear to have tremendous self-control, it turns out that those individuals aren't all that different from those who are struggling. Instead, disciplined people are better at structuring their lives in a way that does not require heroic willpower and self-control. In other words, they spend less time in tempting situations. And I think that's really important. When you think of somebody with self-control, it's not so much their self-control as they're creating an environment where they're not tempted as much, because we only have so much self-control. And like when we wake up in the morning, like we're fully charged, and each decision we make through the day or anything we have to resist temptation, it kind of burns that brain fuel. And we've talked about this in other book club calls where they've actually measured this with like the Israeli judges, and the percentage of people that went for parole hearings, it was highest early in the morning when they were fresh mentally. And you could see as they were becoming mentally fatigued, that number dropped. The people with the best self-control are typically the ones who need to use it the least. It's easier to practice self-restraint when you don't have to use it very often. So yes, perseverance, grit, and willpower are essential to success. But the way to improve these qualities is not by wishing you were a more disciplined person, but by creating a more disciplined environment. And it sounds like that's kind of what Dana did this past week. It's my interpretation. This counterintuitive idea makes even more sense once you understand what happens when a habit is formed in the brain. A habit that has been encoded in the mind is ready to be used whenever the relevant situation arises. And then it talks about smoking and like the cue of horseback riding, and kind of like how this lady was a smoker, and she was able to break the habit of smoking, but like years later, because there was an attachment to like smoking and riding horses, if I remember correctly, and so she went back to a horse, and that habit of smoking kind of popped back up. So like habits, like once a habit is formed, whether it's good or bad, and I remember I was talking to a therapist a couple years ago, and he explained this to me, that there's neural pathways in the brain that are formed when the habits are formed. And once they're there, they're always there. Now he used the metaphor, like you can create a new habit, and like that old neural pathway kind of like weeds kind of grow in it. It's still there, but it's not as smooth and easy to access. But if you build a new habit to replace it, then that one that one is used more easily. And then he kind of talks about it, how bad habits, this is the bottom of 93, bad habits are autocatalytic, can't say that. The process feeds itself. They foster the feelings they try to numb. You feel bad, so you eat junk food. Because you eat junk food, you feel bad. And I've been guilty of this, like on a bad day, just eat crappy food and then feel bad, and because it's like it just perpetual cycle. Watching TV makes you feel sluggish, so you watch more TV because you don't have the energy to do anything else. Worrying about your health makes you feel anxious, which causes you to smoke to ease your anxiety, which makes your health even worse, and soon you're feeling more anxious. It's a downward spiral, a runaway train of bad habits. Researchers refer to this phenomenon as cue-induced wanting. An external trigger causes a compulsive craving to repeat a bad habit. And then he goes on to the last couple of paragraphs. Here's the punchline. You can break a habit, but you're unlikely to forget it. Once the middle grooves of habit have been carved into your brain, they're nearly impossible to remove entirely, even if they go unused for quite a while. That means simply resisting temptation is an ineffective strategy. It is hard to maintain a Zen attitude in a life filled with interruptions. It takes too much energy. In the short run, you can choose to overpower temptation. In the long run, we become a product of the environment that we live in. To put it bluntly, I have never seen someone consistently stick to a positive habit in a negative environment. And I think that part is really good. He's never seen anyone consistently stick to a positive habit in a negative environment. And I want to come back to that in just a second. He gives a few examples. A more reliable approach is to cut bad habits off at the source. One of the most practical ways to eliminate a bad habit is to reduce exposure to the cue that causes it. So you want to eliminate it or make it invisible. If you can't seem to get work done, leave your phone in another room for a few hours. If you're continually feeling like you're not enough, stop following social media accounts that trigger jealousy and envy. If you're wasting too much time watching TV, move the TV out of the bedroom. Or in like Justin's case, like don't have the TV in the area that you work, or don't have it on. If you're spending too much money on electronics, quit reading reviews of the latest tech gear. If you're playing too many video games, unplug the console and put it in a closet after each use, which is going to make it more difficult to access. The practice of an inversion of the first law of behavior change. Rather than make it obvious, you can make it invisible. I'm often surprised by how effective simple changes like these can be. Remove a single cue and the entire habit often fades away. Self-control is a short-term strategy, not a long-term one. You may be able to resist temptation once or twice, but it's unlikely you can master the willpower to override your desires every time. Instead of summoning a new dose of willpower whenever you want to do the right thing, your energy would be better spent optimizing your environment. This is the secret to self-control. Make the cues of your good habits obvious and the cues of your bad habits invisible. So when I kind of look at that, it's like I guess a brief summary would be, we only have so much willpower, and yes, we can use it here and there, but it's more effective to build our environment in a way that leads us to create positive habits, and to create the environment in a way that makes the cues for the bad habits invisible. I like that part on 94. He said, when we're talking about, to put it bluntly, I've never seen someone consistently stick to positive habits in a negative environment. So my question would be, like, what is a positive habit? And it could be in life, like what Dana was talking about, because these things overlap, and or in business that we want to achieve. And how can we change our environment to either foster the positive habit or to make a bad habit invisible? I know for me it's kind of tough, but it's the cell phone. Like if I get a notification, even if I'm working out, even though I know you can't multitask, I'll check my phone. So probably like, I think what I need to do is like during the shipping portion of the day, and when I'm in here on the computer, I should leave the phone in the other room and maybe do a habit stack where how Chris puts in those little buffers, right? Like after I finish shipping, I can go to the other room for a minute, maybe fill up my coffee. While I'm filling my coffee, check, see if anybody needs me, if anything's going on. And then maybe after cleaning, like after your major activities, maybe I'll check it real quickly, but where I don't have it in here where I'm constantly checking it. I think that might help me be more productive. I don't know. Has anybody got any thoughts on that, on environment and habits? Tech?
Yeah, I know that in a previous life you were a teacher in a pretty rough school district or school. So I know I kind of grew up the same way, and I didn't start doing positive things until I did leave that negative environment. My life could have been totally different if I stayed in that environment.
Yeah. Well, and I think like here's the thing, like, where I taught at for many years is like the largest population junior high in Texas, and it was in the city of Dallas, and socioeconomically disadvantaged. So that's like the macro environment. But what I found is like my classroom was a smaller environment, and so I try to, I try to create it as positive as I could. Like I was big, and maybe because before I was a teacher, I was a law enforcement. So like I went into teaching, like really wanting to help reach kids before it was too late. Because like when I was a police officer, I hated arresting and dealing with juveniles. And I always thought, I'm like, man, like what Tech was saying, what if we could reach these kids before? Now that's kind of, looking back, it's kind of naive. Now I did have an impact, and I still have old students that reach out to me and tell me those things, especially the kids I coach. So I know I did some good. But going back to the environment aspect, I try to create an environment in my classroom. We spent a lot of time, and I didn't know this back then, I spent a lot of time like trying to motivate. I thought the key was motivation. I wish I would have known some of the things I know now. That's more about building those habits. But I did build certain habits and structures. Like when you look at a class schedule, it's like you got certain things you got to do, like bell ringers and writing and reading, and Socratic seminars where we discuss it. Like you structure it in a way where those habits over time kind of build and work together. I don't know, I'm just kind of rambling, but I think that's really interesting what Tech is saying, that his environment when he was younger could have led him down a different path. So Tech, so were you conscious of that back then, or is that something that you just kind of realize in retrospect?
No, I could have just as easily been flipping in a different game. It's the same principles, but luckily I flip clothes, and there's no one chasing after you or impeding jail time that comes with that. So considering the environment, I could have been flipping a different product. The principles are exactly the same. So I didn't know when I was in it that there was anything different or something that I was supposed to be doing that I wasn't. I do know that when I had my son, I was 18 years old. And when he was about 1, his mom moved about an hour south. So I had an aunt that lived close by. And on the weekends, I would go stay with my aunt, and then I would have my son for the weekends. And I started spending more time an hour down south and away from all my friends who were up north. And once I got away from all of the friends that were up north, it allowed me to change and do better things as opposed to staying in that environment and doing the wrong things.
And I think that's important to kind of like maybe to highlight that. You know, the old quote, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So by removing yourself from that environment, that negative environment, it allows you to prosper. And when you think about our group, and you know, there's different layers to our group. There's social aspects. There's obviously a lot of knowledge. That's the main part. You know, trying to develop listing habits, trying to acquire knowledge, getting questions answered. But the tone of this group is so positive. And I can't help but think like the impact it's had. And when here's a question, Tuck, like the culture of this group is very positive, and you've set the tone from day one. Were you very conscious about that when you created the group, or is that something that just kind of naturally developed?
I think that we're all here and we're all supposed to be working and going forward, and anything other than that is a disservice.
So it goes down to the goal of, you know, what's the mission of the group to help people become better resellers, I guess, in a way. And anything that any behavior that doesn't kind of mesh with that, you know, it would be an impediment.
Absolutely. And, you know, if you let a couple things slide here and there, you know, gradually becomes a playground, and that's not what we're here for, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And then kind of think about like what you're talking about, the classroom. That's classroom's a perfect example. You know, like different classrooms have different environments, and if a teacher allows some small things to slip, the next thing you know, you can lose total control of that whole classroom.
Yeah, but you know, teachers have it hard because in the classroom they have that positive environment. Outside the classroom, they go back to a negative environment. So it's one step forward, 2 steps back a lot of the time. And I think as resellers or eBay sellers, we experience the same thing. A lot of people go good for a little while, they take that 1 step forward, but a lot of them regress to that 2 steps back.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, like comparing the two, like an analogy almost. Like I know there's some programs in some districts, and I know Dallas had one where they realized that they were losing everything when they left the school, and so they were creating almost like boarding environments where they had like a little mini campus, and the students would go there, and you would have teachers or adults that would help them with the habits of doing homework, and for some of these kids, like even, you know, hygiene and things of that nature. And then maybe for X amount of time on a Sunday, then they would visit with family. It'd be kind of interesting. I just imagine, I know it wouldn't be practical, like a reseller compound, almost like a boot camp. Dana?
I was paying attention to the line that you and Tech were going on, and it just realized for me that just like a classroom, when Tech said that he was able to jump from his environment to make the changes, what if our group does the exact same thing? What if it doesn't have to be perfect 90% of the time, but changing your environment and being in a positive one, even if it's for 30 minutes during a call, once a week, twice a week, it just breaks your mind from, it helps a lot for people who are not in a routine or not used to doing this, that if you just see an example or you're in a positive environment where you can actually do that, it just breaks you from yours. Like, let's say if your environment is not perfectly conclusive to being a perfect reseller or being consistent, having access to a place where for 30 minutes you are, it provides that contrast to your experience.
Yeah, it's like you know, when you think about teaching, like there's different stages. The first stage is like modeling. And so, for example, when Tech explains and shows videos of how he does something, that's modeling. See how I do it. And then the next phase would be like, you know, group practice where the teacher is doing most of the work, but students are also helping. And then it goes where students are doing most of the work and the teacher's there for assistance. Then it's independent practice where the teacher does it all. And I don't know necessarily how that would work here, but I do think the modeling and seeing how successful people, or we can even learn from people who are struggling, right? Like a lot of times we hear people's struggles and there's some value there too. Like this is what's not working for them, and to be aware. And I think, and I'll say this for myself, it's like being open to these ideas is important, right? Because we get these habits of doing it, especially if you've been reselling a while, you get a habit of doing it a certain way, but are we open to really trying something different? Let's see, Justin said, I'm going to keep my old phone next time I get a new one and have an eBay only phone. Maybe that will help with no notification. Kind of like text Canon doesn't send notifications, less distractions, and personal phone doesn't get filled up. Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Justin. And I think like Chris does that too. Like his workers, like they have phones, but it's only to take photos with. Ben?
Yeah, something about like environments that you guys were talking about. It's like, you know, when I hear Tech talk about some of that stuff, it kind of reminds me of just some of my, you know, growing up, and how you don't realize how like dysfunctional the environment you are in until you go into another environment and you see how different it is, and how people, you know, can, you know, I guess kind of like speak to you and just kind of treat you different and stuff like that. And yeah, it's kind of, I feel like even for like a reseller coming in here, their dysfunction could be just like trying to sell everything and just trying to figure it out. And then you come in here and then everyone's like kind of trying to niche down and do, you know, whatever their specialty is. And it's kind of hard to like kind of reorient yourself to do that. And I think that, you know, a lot of people who come in here kind of start there where they're just kind of selling everything. And then you're just like trying to kind of reorient yourself to this new kind of like group, you know, thing. I kind of rambled, sorry.
No, that makes perfect sense. I mean, you don't know what you don't know. And if, like, I know for myself, like before I found Chris's group and then joined Tech's group, you know, it was YouTube was where I got my knowledge from. But YouTube, a lot of that's based on entertainment. And not that I didn't learn some things, but there's not a consistent, like you're taking this from this person, this from that person. You don't have a consistent game plan. Tech?
I put a link in the chat of someone who brand new to reselling, started in January, joined the group. Look at his photo setup, look at the storage setup. How many years did they skip? 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? Just by getting in the right environment, they automatically passed go. They collected the $200 and now they're running around the board.
Yeah, I'm looking at that right now. That's pretty amazing.
Like, how much of an advantage is that to someone that's brand new selling on eBay, that they automatically got to go to that level?
I don't even know how you measure it, like, because I think there's many resellers that would never even reach that level of efficiency on their own.
Man, how many times have you guys like run into someone at the thrift store and then they see you, you know, see all the stuff in your cart and they start talking to you about it, and then you just can tell like kind of where they are with it, you know, where they're just like totally at the ground level, even though they've been doing it for years. It's interesting.
It's like they got multiple years of the same first year of reselling.
Exactly.
Kim?
Yeah, I was just going to jump in and say that I am one of those new people who, not on a whim necessarily, but, you know, I wasn't going to do this really super seriously. And now I'm like this kind of planning fanatic who's just got her storage unit, and I've got all sorts of stuff. Everyone got the IKEA little bags. That was my little joke to myself. But no, I mean, I just rattled on for 45 minutes with my brother earlier, and he was just like, "You've learned all of that in 2 weeks?" And I'm like, "Yeah." I said, "I'm kind of crazy and I'm skipping meetings at my real job to do this." But yeah, the advantage is huge. Don't tell my boss I'm skipping my meetings at my corporate job, but they'll never know.
Your
Um,
secret is safe here.
Thank you very much. I figured you guys were safe. But no, it is a huge advantage because you don't know this stuff. You don't even think about it. And then I've started looking at other people, and and again, not any criticism of somebody, but you don't know what you don't know. And I'm looking at other listings, and it's like, oh, no, don't do that. You want to put that there and that there. And it's been like 2.5 weeks for me. And what I've learned is insane. So thank you. And now I'm just joining all the calls, and, I've got to pull the trigger and start selling, but I'll get there. I just have to plan first. I have to plan.
Well, welcome to the group, and we're glad you're
Thanks.
here.
Yeah, but it's been super helpful, and yeah, that's all.
No, thanks for sharing that. I think that's good to have perspective of newer people coming into the group. And I know, like Shane mentions this a lot on the calls, that, like some of the advice that's given in the group, especially from tech, is so valuable, and it's worth way more than the roughly the $1 a day we pay for it. And I know tech in the 24-hour room one day, kind of reset some of the culture, I guess, in a way, and emphasize the need of acquiring knowledge and listening to these experts. And we all want to chime in, but like when somebody is really laying down some serious knowledge that we could benefit from, to just really absorb that in and to take that in, because it's going to accelerate our growth. Yeah, and like Kim said in the chat, like a lot of the other, like I got out of all the other Facebook groups. Like there's really no need to. If you think about it, like this group, and Chris mentioned this recently, like there's really more content than even a person could probably watch in a week and get their work done. Like you almost kind of have to pick and choose, like what you're going to consume, because there's so much content, and so much of it is good and valuable. And even like from the perspective of maybe people that have been in the group, like I've been in the group a little bit over a year now. I think oftentimes we need that reinforcement because tech hasn't changed his message. He'll tell you, go to the very first video, the very first podcast, and that's all you need. But I think there's value in hearing that message repeated consistently, because we're all at different stages, and we may not be at the point in our reselling journey where we're, for whatever reason, really at the point where we can take that information and soak it in and really implement it. But maybe we hear it 5 or 10 more times, and then finally we have that epiphany. It's kind of like when you read a good book. If you read it in high school and you go back and read it 10 or 15 years, you're gonna get things that you didn't get the first time, and you could read it again later and get something else. So I think this group is like the perfect example of the environment. The fact that we're even talking about, habits and creating positive environments, and how we can change negative environments. I don't think there's any other Facebook groups out there that are doing that.
It's great
right.
for you too, for sure.
Okay, so this was a really short chapter. The chapter summary, and we'll just kind of go over this as a finishing touch. If anybody's got any final thoughts, we can talk about. The inversion of the first law of behavior change is to make it invisible. So the first law is to make it obvious. That's like creating your positive habits. And maybe that's like attending the morning call and attending or watching the Tuesday call. Once a habit is formed, it is unlikely to be forgotten. People with high self-control tend to spend less time in tempting situations. It's easier to avoid temptation than to resist it. One of the most practical ways to eliminate a bad habit is to reduce exposure to the cue that causes it. And the last one is self-control is a short-term strategy, not a long-term one. So that's wrapping up the first law. The next chapter starts the second law, which is to make it attractive. And then chapter 8 will be how to make a habit irresistible. And I know, and I kind of struggle with this. Like, I know we're only doing a chapter 9, and that seems like the chapter weekend. I know that seems really slow, but I don't know. I think this is probably the one book, because I think so much of reselling is really structured on habits. And so if we could kind of maybe think about each week, like what Justin was saying, how he's going to make a change in his environment. If we can just really kind of soak in each chapter and evaluate it and look at it from our perspective, and what tweaks can we make, I think by the end of this, we'll be in a better place to have those habits. And I think for me, it's like reselling is just a habit. Like, once you get the information and the knowledge, then it's just the habit, which leads to the consistency. And then I think the results come over time. Anybody got any final thoughts on tonight?
Yeah, I wanted to add, I reread this book that we're going through now, and I just kind of randomly opened the page, but this one hits home. And the reason why I love this group so much is this quote right here from chapter 9. And it just says, one of the most effective things you can do to build better habits is to join a culture where your desired behavior is the normal behavior. New habits seem achievable when you see others doing them every day. And to sum it up, that's what this group is. We have, life happens, but it's like we still hit our listing goals. We still hit our short-term goals, our long-term goals. And when we see other people in the group doing it, like that lady with 8 or 9 kids, and it's just like you're inspired every day because people are going through stuff, and things happen. Like, does Tech have a day where things are just smooth and things are great? Like, guy's cutting his arm off and still gets his listing done and poking his eye out and stuff. So it's like, I just see inspiration from you guys. And I don't join the book call often, but I'm inspired by everyone here. And I just say, keep doing what you're doing, keep working hard, keep working hard on yourself. That's what I like to see. So just getting better.
Yeah, I like that. Well said. That's a great quote. Just seeing that what Tech is, what Tech is capable, what he's achieved. And we've talked about this, like with a 4-minute mile example. A lot of us, you don't know until you see it can be done, and that changes everything. And then to be in a group like this, where it's a mastermind, and it's positive, and we're sharing and we're learning, and different people can contribute in different ways. And yeah, I think it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody else got any final thoughts? All right. Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you next week, same time, same place. We'll talk about chapter 8, and everybody have a good night.